The air inside the Nexus auction house reeked of desperation, masked by expensive incense. Jackson Reed pulled his weathered jacket closer as he moved through the crowd of wealthy collectors, their diamond-studded fingers wrapped around glasses of imported Centauri wine. The underground venue on Space Station Nebula Prime hummed with the kind of nervous energy that accompanied forbidden commerce, the buying and selling of sentient beings. Jackson forced himself to breathe steadily as he surveyed the room. His calloused hands, marked by old plasma burns from his military days, remained steady at his sides despite the rage building in his chest. He'd seen too much of this trade during his service with the Colonial Marines, done too little to stop it when he had the chance. Tonight would be different. Ladies and gentlemen, the auctioneer's silk-smooth voice echoed through hidden speakers. Welcome to tonight's exclusive presentation. We offer the finest acquisitions from across the Outer Ring territories. The crowd murmured appreciatively as the first beings were led onto the circular platform. Each person represented someone's stolen life, someone's family torn apart. Jackson's jaw tightened with every bid, every casual discussion of another soul's worth. He touched the plasma pistol concealed beneath his jacket, but patience was his weapon tonight. Then she appeared. The woman moved with careful grace despite the neural restraints around her wrists. Her skin held an ethereal blue luminescence, marked by intricate silver patterns that traced delicate lines across her face and arms. Even from across the crowded room, Jackson could see the defiance burning in her violet eyes. Though her posture spoke of forced submission, behold, the auctioneer, announced with theatrical flair, a rare Ethrosian empath. Neural dampeners ensure complete compliance, and her telepathic abilities make her particularly responsive to her owner's desires. The bidding erupted immediately. Jackson watched the numbers climb on the holographic display, each credit representing another nail in this woman's coffin. He'd infiltrated this auction with plans to gather intelligence on the trafficking network that had destroyed his sister's life. But seeing her standing there proud despite her chains changed everything. 100,000 credits, called a corpulent merchant whose reputation for cruelty preceded him across 3-star systems. 150, countered a thin woman with cybernetic implants covering half her skull. Jackson stepped forward. 200,000. The crowd turned to assess this new bidder. He kept his expression neutral despite the storm raging inside him. The woman on the platform the auctioneer had called her Zara met his gaze briefly. He saw fear there, but also a spark of curiosity at this unexpected development. 250. The merchant snarled, his beady eyes fixed on Zara like she was a prize to be devoured. 300,000. Jackson replied without hesitation. Though it would drain most of his carefully saved accounts, the bidding war continued. But Jackson had advantages his competitors lacked. Years of military logistics had taught him resource management, and he'd been planning this operation for months. When the hammer finally fell at 420,000 credits, Zara belonged to him, at least on paper. The transfer was swift and clinical. Jackson signed the digital documents while Zara was led to a private room for delivery. His skin crawled at the terminology, but he maintained his cover until the heavy door sealed behind them. Zara stood in the center of the sterile chamber, still restrained, watching him with wary eyes. She was smaller than she'd appeared on the platform, but her posture suggested coiled strength despite her bonds. "Please," she said, her voice carrying a melodic accent he'd never heard before. "If you must hurt me, make it quick." Jackson holstered his weapon and pulled out a plasma cutter. "I'm not going to hurt you," he said quietly, approaching slowly with the tool raised. "I'm going to get you out of here." Her violet eyes widened as he carefully sliced through her restraints. The metal fell away, leaving angry red marks on her luminescent skin. She rubbed her wrists, staring at him in confusion. "Why?" she whispered. Jackson met her gaze steadily. "Because everyone deserves to be free." He handed her a plain gray cloak from his pack. "Can you walk? We need to move quickly." Zara nodded, though uncertainty flickered across her features as they prepared to leave the auction house behind. Jackson caught her glancing back at the platform where others still waited to be sold. "We'll come back for them," he promised, reading the conflict in her expression. "But first, We get you to safety." For the first time since he'd seen her, Zara's rigid posture softened slightly. She pulled the cloak around her shoulders and followed him toward whatever uncertain freedom awaited beyond these walls. They moved through the station's service corridors, avoiding the main thoroughfares where security scanners might identify them. Jackson's military training served them well as he navigated the maze of maintenance tunnels and cargo bays. Zara followed silently, her bare feet making no sound on the metal grating. "My ship is docked in Bay 94, Jackson whispered as they approached the final checkpoint. "Once we're aboard, we'll be safe." But as they rounded the corner, 3 figures in crimson uniforms blocked their path, syndicate enforcers, their weapons already drawn, target acquired. One of them spoke into his comm unit, preparing for retrieval. Jackson pushed Zara behind him, his hand moving to his pistol. "Run," he told her. "Get to the ship." "I won't leave you," she said firmly, and for a moment, he felt something brush against his mind, warm, protective, fierce. The lead enforcer raised his weapon toward Zara. "The merchandise belongs to the Crimson Syndicate. Surrender her, and we might let you live." "She's not merchandise," Jackson snarled, drawing his plasma pistol. "She's a person." The firefight was brief but intense. Jackson's military training gave him an edge, but they were outnumbered. Just as the situation seemed hopeless, Zara stepped forward, her skin beginning to glow brighter. The enforcers suddenly staggered, their weapons clattering to the floor as they clutched their heads in pain. Whatever Zara was doing, it was working her, telepathic abilities breaking through their neural shielding. "Now," she gasped, her face pale from the effort. They ran for the docking bay, alarms now wailing throughout the station. Jackson's ship, the Wanderer's Hope, sat waiting like a promise of freedom. As they scrambled aboard and lifted off, leaving Nebula Prime behind, Jackson caught Zara looking back at the shrinking station. "We'll stop them," he promised as they jumped to hyperspace. "All of them," Zara nodded, her violet eyes reflecting the swirling lights of the jump. For the first time in months, she felt something she'd almost forgotten: hope. The Wanderer's Hope drifted silently through hyperspace, its hull bathed in the ethereal blue glow of the jump corridor. Zara sat on the edge of the narrow bunk in the quarters Jackson had given her, staring at the simple meal he'd left on the small table. Real food, not the nutrient paste she'd grown accustomed to during her captivity. Her luminescent skin still bore faint marks from the neural restraints, and she found herself touching them unconsciously. 3 days had passed since the auction, and her rescuer remained an enigma. Jackson Reed kept his distance, speaking only when necessary, his deep voice always gentle despite the hardness in his storm-gray eyes. She'd expected demands, conditions, for her freedom, but none came. Instead, he'd shown her how to operate the environmental controls, the ship's entertainment system, even the food dispenser. "You can go anywhere on the ship," he'd explained that first night, "except the engine room during jump transitions. The hyperdrive gets temperamental around telepathic signatures." Zara hadn't understood the technical details, but she'd heard the respect in his voice. He was asking, not commanding, a concept so foreign after months of slavery that it left her bewildered. A soft chime indicated someone at her door. "Comin'," she called, smoothing down the soft clothes he'd provided, fabrics that didn't irritate her sensitive skin. Jackson entered carrying a steaming mug, his movements careful and measured. He'd changed from his auction disguise into practical ship clothes that emphasized his broad shoulders and the numerous scars visible on his forearms. "Thought you might like some tea," he said, offering her the cup. "It's a blend from the Tau Ceti colonies, supposed to be good for stress." She accepted the mug, her fingertips briefly brushing his as he handed it over. The contact sent an unexpected warmth through her, different from the invasive mental probes she'd endured in captivity. This felt safe. "Why are you being kind to me?" she asked, voicing the question that had haunted her for days. Jackson settled into the chair across from her, maintaining respectful distance. "My sister was taken by traffickers when she was 17, he said quietly. "By the time I found her," he trailed off, his jaw tightening, "I was too late. Military protocol, chain of command, all the rules that kept me from acting fast. Enough." The pain in his voice resonated through Zara despite her dampened telepathic abilities. She set down the tea and leaned forward slightly. "I'm sorry." Her name was Rebecca. Becca. Jackson's weathered hands clasped together. She had this laugh that could light up a room. "Used to tease me about being too serious all the time." He met Zara's gaze. "When I saw you on that platform, I saw her, saw every person I failed to save." Understanding bloomed in Zara's chest. "So this is about redemption, maybe. Or maybe it's just about doing what's right." Magnus stood, moving toward the door. "You should rest. We'll reach the Kepler station tomorrow, and I'll find you safe passage to the sanctuary worlds." "Wait." The word escaped before she could stop it. Jackson paused, his hand on the door control. "What if I don't want to go to the sanctuary worlds?" He turned back, confusion flickering across his features. "They have colonies there for displaced Ethrosians, people who understand your culture, your abilities. I've been cut off from my people for so long, I'm not sure I remember how to be Ethrosian anymore." Zara's voice grew smaller. "The neural dampeners, they've been suppressing my telepathic abilities for months. I can barely sense emotions anymore, let alone communicate mind to mind." Jackson's expression softened. "The effects aren't permanent. With time and practice, your abilities will return. What if I don't want them to?" The admission surprised even her. On Ethros, telepaths are revered, but isolated. We're expected to serve the collective consciousness, to sacrifice individual desires for the greater good. I was chosen for the breeding programs because of my genetic markers, not because I had any choice in the matter. She stood and moved to the small viewport, gazing out at the swirling colors of hyperspace. When the Crimson Syndicate raided our world, part of me felt relieved, even in captivity. I was making my own decisions, even if they were just about how to survive. Jackson approached slowly, stopping just behind her. She could feel the warmth radiating from his body, smell the subtle scent of ship soap and something uniquely him. "Freedom isn't always about where you go," he said softly. "Sometimes it's about choosing who you become." Zara turned to face him. Their bodies were now mere inches apart. This close, she could see the flecks of silver in his gray eyes, the small scar that cut through his left eyebrow. Her dampened telepathic abilities stirred, picking up fragments of his emotions' protectiveness, loneliness, and something deeper he was trying to suppress. "The neural dampeners are wearing off," she whispered. "I can feel what you're feeling." Jackson took a careful step back. "I'm sorry. I know telepathic contact without consent is." Zara reached out, her fingers barely grazing his wrist. "It doesn't hurt. It's comforting. I haven't felt anyone else's emotions clearly in so long." She paused, studying his face. "You're lonely, too." The admission hung between them like a bridge neither was sure they should cross. Jackson's breathing grew slightly uneven as her touch sent warmth up his arm. "Zara," he said carefully, "you've been through trauma. It's natural to form attachments to someone who shows you kindness. But is that what you think this is?" Her violet eyes flashed with something between hurt and determination. "Misplaced gratitude? I think you deserve time to figure out who you are when you're not afraid." Jackson replied, though his voice betrayed his internal struggle. "I think you deserve better than settling for the first person who didn't hurt you." The ship's intercom crackled to life, breaking the tension. "Captain Reed, we're receiving priority transmissions from multiple sources. Some of them look urgent." Jackson stepped back, the moment dissolving. "I'll be right there." He looked at Zara apologetically. "We'll continue this conversation later." As he left, Zara touched her lips, wondering what it would feel like to kiss someone whose emotions she could actually sense, someone who saw her as more than a prize to be won or a tool to be used. The neural dampeners were definitely wearing off. She could feel Jackson's conflicted emotions even through the ship's bulkheads, his desire warring with his protective instincts, his fear of taking advantage of her vulnerability. For the first time since her rescue, she found herself hoping their journey together wouldn't end at the next station. Maybe freedom wasn't just about escaping the past, maybe it was about choosing a future worth fighting for. The mining colony of Heaven's Rest clung to the surface of a barren moon like a metallic growth, its domes and tunnels carved from ancient rock. Jackson guided the wanderer's hope through the crowded approach lanes, dodging cargo haulers and mining vessels with practiced ease. The urgent transmissions had contained bounty notices. The Crimson Syndicate was offering 15 million credits for Zara's return, and half that for Jackson's head. Stay close to me, Jackson murmured as they walked through the colony's main concourse, his hand resting protectively on Zara's lower back. And remember, we're married traders looking for a cargo run to the rim worlds. Zara nodded, acutely aware of his touch through the simple dress he'd purchased for her at their last stop. Her telepathic abilities had grown stronger over the past week, and Jackson's emotions were becoming clearer to her, his constant vigilance, his growing affection, and the desire he kept trying to suppress. The Spacer's Rest sat wedged between a parts dealer and a hydroponics supply shop, its neon sign flickering weakly in the artificial twilight of the colony's main dome. Jackson approached the desk clerk, a weary man whose cybernetic eye whirred as it focused on them. Need a room for the night, Jackson said, sliding a credit chip across the scratched counter. Something quiet. Only got one room left, the clerk replied, his mechanical voice flat. Double occupancy, but it's small. That a problem? Jackson glanced at Zara, who felt heat rise in her cheeks. We'll manage, she said quickly, surprising herself with her boldness. The room was indeed tiny, barely large enough for a single bed, a wash station, and a narrow chair. Jackson set their bags down and immediately moved to check the security panel, his movements tense. I can sleep in the chair, he offered, not meeting her eyes. Don't be ridiculous, Zara said, sitting on the edge of the bed to test its firmness. We're both adults, and it's just for one night. Jackson busied himself with his portable scanner, sweeping the room for surveillance devices. Found 3 listening devices and a video transmitter, he muttered, systematically disabling each one. This place is crawling with information brokers. As evening settled over the colony, they shared a meal from the room's food dispenser, sitting close together. On the bed, Zara found herself studying Jackson's profile in the dim light, the strong line of his jaw, the way his dark hair fell across his forehead when he was concentrating. Tell me about your life before, she said softly. Before the military, before your sister. Jackson set down his ration pack and leaned back against the wall. My parents had a small farm on Verdania Prime. Nothing fancy, just grain crops and livestock. Rebecca and I used to race through the fields, competing to see who could reach the old oak tree first. His expression grew distant. She always won. Said it was because she was lighter on her feet. But I think she was just faster. Zara scooted closer, drawn by the warmth in his voice. It sounds peaceful. It was until the corporate wars reached our sector. My parents lost the farm to debt, and we moved to the city stations. Jackson's jaw tightened. That's where the gangs recruited kids like us. I joined the military to get away from that life. But Rebecca, she fell in with the wrong crowd. Without thinking, Zara reached out and took his hand. The moment their skin touched, her telepathic abilities flared, and she gasped as his memories washed over hair flashes of a laughing girl with Jackson's gray eyes. The desperate search through seedy spaceports. The terrible moment when he'd found her body in an abandoned cargo hold. I'm sorry, she whispered, tears streaming down her face. I didn't mean to intrude. Jackson squeezed her hand gently. It's okay. I've never shared that with anyone before. They sat in comfortable silence, her hands still clasped in his. Zara could feel his pulse through their connection, steady and strong. The walls between them seemed to dissolve as she sensed his loneliness, his guilt, and underneath it all, his growing love for her. Jackson, she began, but he silenced her by lifting his free hand to cup her cheek. Zara, I need you to know that whatever happens, whatever we face out there, you're not alone anymore. She leaned into his touch, her violet eyes searching his face. Neither are you. The moment stretched between them, charged with possibility, until a sharp bang echoed through the corridor outside their room. Jackson was on his feet instantly, plasma pistol in hand, motioning for silence. Voices drifted through the thin walls, harsh, professional tones that made Zara's blood run cold. Target confirmed in room 7, Ethrosian female, luminescent skin, traveling with a human male matching Reed's description. Jackson grabbed their bags with one hand and pulled Zara toward the small window with the other. "Emergency exit," he whispered, forcing the corroded latch open. They squeezed through the narrow opening onto a maintenance catwalk that stretched along the colony's outer ring. The artificial gravity was weaker here, and Zara stumbled as they hurried along the metal grating. Behind them, she heard the sharp crack of their door being breached. Shouts echoed through the corridors as their pursuers discovered the empty room. "This way." Jackson guided her toward a service ladder leading down to the docking levels. "Stay quiet," and a plasma bolt sizzled past Zara's head, leaving a smoking scar in the rock wall. She spun to see three figures in crimson armor emerging from the inn's upper levels, weapons raised. "Syndicate enforcers," Jackson growled, returning fire while pushing Zara toward the ladder. "Move." They scrambled down the rungs as energy weapons lit up the cavern around them. Zara's enhanced senses picked up the emotions of their pursuers' cold professionalism, mixed with greed and anticipation. These weren't random bounty hunters. They were elite operatives. A bolt caught Jackson in the shoulder, spinning him around. He grunted in pain, but kept moving, blood seeping through his shirt. "You're hurt," Zara gasped. "I'll live. Keep going." They reached the docking bay level as alarms began wailing throughout the colony. Jackson led her through a maze of cargo containers and parked ships, heading for their berth. Behind them, the sounds of pursuit grew closer. "There," Jackson pointed to their ship, its boarding ramp already beginning to lower. Almost a figure dropped from above, landing between them and the Wanderer's Hope. The enforcer was massive, his armor bristling with weapons, his helmet hiding his features. He raised a heavy plasma rifle toward Zara. "Target acquired," he said into his comm unit. Preparing for capture. Time seemed to slow as Zara felt her telepathic abilities surge. No longer suppressed by fear or dampeners, she reached out with her mind. The enforcer's thoughts were shielded, but she could sense the neural interface connecting him to his armor's targeting system. With a concentrated effort she'd never attempted before, Zara scrambled the connection. The enforcer's rifle swung wildly as his targeting computer malfunctioned, firing harmlessly into the cavern ceiling. Jackson didn't waste the opportunity. He tackled the confused enforcer, and they went down in a tangle of limbs and armor. The fight was brief but vicious, ending when Jackson managed to turn the man's own weapon against him. They stumbled aboard their ship as more enforcers poured into the docking bay. The Wanderer's Hope's engines roared to life, and they lifted off. Amid a hail of plasma fire as they cleared the moon's atmosphere, Zara collapsed into the co-pilot's seat, exhausted by her telepathic effort. Jackson's shoulder was bleeding badly, but he kept them on course until they could jump to hyperspace. "That was incredible," he said, looking at her with new respect. "I've never seen anyone disable military-grade neural interfaces like that." Zara managed a weak smile. "Neither have I didn't even know I could do it." Jackson reached over and took her hand, their fingers intertwining naturally. "We make a good team." As the stars blurred around them, Zara squeezed his hand and felt the truth of his words resonate through their growing bond. They were no longer just rescuer and rescued, they were partners, facing the galaxy's dangers together. But behind them, tracking beacons hidden in the colony's communication array had already transmitted their jump vector to the Syndicate fleet. The hunt was far from over. The Wanderer's Hope drifted silently in the shadow of a massive asteroid, its engines powered down to minimal signatures. Jackson winced as Zara carefully cleaned the plasma burn on his shoulder, her luminescent fingers gentle against his damaged skin. They'd been hiding in this forgotten corner of the Kepler belt for 2 days while the ship's repair systems worked on the damage from their escape. "Hold still," Zara murmured, applying a healing gel that tingled against the wound. "The burn goes deeper than you thought." The small medical bay forced them into close proximity, and Jackson found himself acutely aware of every movement she made. Her telepathic abilities had grown stronger since Heaven's Rest, and he could sometimes feel her emotions brushing against his mind like gentle waves there. She said, securing a fresh bandage, "That should heal properly now." Her hands lingered on his shoulders, and when he looked up, their faces were inches apart. "Jackson," she said softly, his name carrying new weight on her lips. "Don't," he whispered, his voice rough with emotion he could no longer hide. "Don't tell me this is just gratitude or trauma bonding," she replied, her violet eyes searching his. "I can feel what you feel, remember?" Jackson reached up to cup her face, his thumb tracing the delicate silver patterns along her cheekbone. "Then you know I've been fighting this since the moment I saw you on that platform. Why fight it?" She leaned into his touch, her own hands sliding down to rest against his chest. "We might not have much time left. The syndicate will find us eventually. Because you deserve better than a broken soldier with blood on his hands," Jackson said, though his resolve was crumbling as she pressed closer. "What I deserve," Zara said firmly, "is the right to choose my own future, and I choose you." She kissed him, then soft and tentative at first, then with growing passion as he responded. Her telepathic abilities opened between them, sharing not just the physical sensation, but the emotions behind it. His fierce protectiveness, her deep trust, the love they'd both been afraid to acknowledge. Jackson lifted her onto the medical table, his hands tangling in her silver hair as she wrapped her arms around his neck. Every touch was amplified by their mental connection, creating an intimacy neither had ever experienced. "I can feel everything you feel," she gasped against his lips. "It's overwhelming." "Good overwhelming or bad overwhelming?" he asked, pulling back to study her face. "Perfect overwhelming," she smiled, pulling him back down to her. They made love slowly, tenderly. Their minds and bodies joined in ways that transcended simple physical pleasure. Through their telepathic bond, Zara shared memories of her homeworld's twin moons while Jackson showed her the peace he'd found in her presence. They moved together as if they'd been lovers for years, each knowing instinctively what the other needed. Afterward, they lay entwined on the narrow medical bed, Jackson tracing patterns on Zara's luminescent skin while she rested her head on his chest. "I love you," she said quietly, the words carrying the weight of absolute certainty. "I love you too," Jackson replied, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. "More than I thought I could love anyone." They dozed fitfully, taking comfort in each other's warmth, until the ship's proximity alarms began shrieking. Jackson was up instantly, pulling on his clothes while Zara did the same. "Multiple contacts," he reported, checking the sensor display. "Syndicate ships, at least 8 of them." Through the viewports, they could see the sleek warships emerging from hyperspace, their hulls bristling with weapons. The Crimson Syndicate had found them. "How?" Zara asked, her face pale. Jackson's expression darkened as he studied the tactical display. "They're not scanning for us. They knew exactly where we were." He turned to meet her eyes. "Someone sold us out." The lead syndicate ship powered up its communications ray, and a cold voice filled their cockpit. "Captain Reed, you have something that belongs to us. Surrender the Ethrosian, and we might let you live long enough to spend your bounty." Jackson's hand moved to the weapon controls, but Zara caught his wrist. Through their bond, she shared an image that made his blood run cold. A massive fleet of syndicate ships, waiting just outside the asteroid field. "There are too many," she whispered. "We can't fight them all." Jackson stared at the overwhelming odds displayed on his screens, then at the woman he'd grown to love more than his own life. A desperate plan began forming in his mind. "Maybe we can't fight them," he said quietly, "but we might be able to outrun them long enough to reach the jump point." He began powering up their engines, knowing it would give away their position, but hoping speed might succeed where stealth had failed. The Wanderer's hope lurched forward, diving deeper into the asteroid field as plasma fire erupted around them. "Jackson," Zara said, her telepathic senses picking up his true intentions. "What are you planning?" He squeezed her hand, pouring all his love through their mental connection. "Whatever it takes to keep you safe." The ship shuddered as a plasma bolt grazed their hull, and alarms wailed throughout the cockpit. Behind them, the syndicate fleet was closing fast, their superior numbers and firepower making escape seem impossible. But Jackson had one advantage they didn't expect: a woman who could touch minds across space, and the desperate love that might just be enough to save them both. "Jump drive charging," the computer announced. "Estimate 3 minutes to completion." Through the chaos of the battle, Zara closed her eyes and reached out with her telepathic abilities, not to the syndicate ships hunting them, but to something Far more dangerous the massive asteroid they'd been hiding behind. The ancient rock held secrets, pockets of unstable gas that had been building pressure for millennia. With careful mental manipulation, she began to trigger a chain reaction that would turn their hiding place into a weapon. "Zara, what are you doing?" Jackson shouted over the alarms. "Giving us a chance," she replied, her skin glowing brighter as she poured her power into the asteroid's core. The explosion, when it came, lit up the entire asteroid field like a newborn star. The shockwave caught 3 Syndicate ships, crushing their hulls and sending debris spinning through space. The remaining vessels scattered, their formation broken, jump drive ready. The computer announced. Now, Jackson slammed his hand down on the activation control dot as the stars blurred around them, jumping to hyperspace. Zara collapsed against him, her telepathic reserves exhausted. But they were alive, and for the first time since this nightmare began, they were truly free. "Where to now?" she asked weakly. Jackson smiled, his arms tightening around her. "Somewhere they'll never find us. Somewhere we can build the life we choose." The Wanderer's hope disappeared into the cosmic void, carrying to hearts that had found each other in the darkness and refused to let go. 6 months later, the morning sun cast golden light across the rolling hills of verdant prime, illuminating fields of wheat that swayed gently in the warm breeze. Zara stood on the porch of their small farmhouse, watching Jackson guide their harvester through the grain, his movements confident and peaceful in a way she'd never seen during their time running from the Syndicate. The agricultural colony had welcomed them with open arms, thanks to Elena Vasquez, the colonial administrator who'd helped them establish new identities. The woman had taken one look at their fabricated immigration documents and quietly shredded them. "I don't care who you used to be," Elena had said with a knowing smile. "I care who you choose to be now." Now Zara touched her slightly rounded belly and smiled. The life growing inside her was a miracle she'd never dared to hope for, conceived in love rather than the cold calculations of a breeding program. Her telepathic abilities, fully restored, had already begun to sense the tiny consciousness forming within her, curious and bright. "The baby's awake," she murmured as Jackson climbed the porch steps, his work clothes dusty but his eyes bright with contentment. "Already." He wrapped his arms around her from behind, his hands settling protectively over her stomach. "It's like she knows when I'm coming home." Zara leaned back against his chest, enjoying the solid warmth of him. "Call it a father's intuition," Jackson chuckled, pressing a kiss to the silver patterns along her neck. "They'll be happy with whatever we get, as long as they're healthy." Through their telepathic bond, Zara felt the truth of his words, the pure, overwhelming love he already felt for their unborn child. It was a love without conditions or expectations, so different from the clinical detachment she'd experienced. "On Ethros, Elena stopped by while you were in the South Field," she said, turning in his arms. "The Galactic Council finally shut down the last of the Syndicate's operations. The trafficking rings are finished." Jackson's expression grew serious. "Any word on the survivors?" "Rehabilitation centers on 12 worlds, funded by the seized Syndicate assets. Full medical care, psychological support, and reintegration programs." Zara's voice carried quiet satisfaction. "The testimony we provided helped make it possible." It had taken courage to step forward, to testify before the council about their experiences. But seeing the trafficking network finally crumble had been worth the risk of exposure. The Crimson Syndicate was no more, its leaders either dead or imprisoned for life. "Good," Jackson said simply. But she felt the complex emotions beneath his calm exterior: grief for his sister, satisfaction at seeing justice done, and relief that other families wouldn't suffer as his had. They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. The baby stirred again, and Zara gasped as she felt a flutter of telepathic contact, their daughter reaching out with abilities that were already manifesting. "She's strong," Jackson observed, his hand moving to where the baby had kicked. "She'll need to be," Zara replied, thinking of the future their child would inherit. "The galaxy's changing. The old barriers between species are breaking down. She'll grow up in a world where being different is celebrated, not feared." Or enslaved, Jackson added grimly, then shook his head. Sorry, old habits. Don't apologize for being protective, Zara said, standing on her toes to kiss him softly. It's one of the things I love about you. They made their way inside as the first stars appeared in the darkening sky. Their home was simple but comfortable handmade furniture, solar panels on the roof, and a garden that provided most of their food. It was everything Zara had never known she wanted. I've been thinking, Jackson said as they prepared dinner together, moving around each other with the easy familiarity of longtime partners. About names, oh. Zara raised an eyebrow, amused by his sudden shyness. Rebecca, he said quietly, if you don't mind, I'd like to honor my sister. Zara felt tears spring to her eyes, not from sadness, but from the depth of love she felt for this man who could find hope in the midst of grief. Rebecca Voss Reed, she said, testing the name. I think she'd like that. You think so? Jackson's voice was rough with emotion. I know so, Zara replied, her telepathic senses picking up the echo of old memories, a young girl's laughter, the bond between siblings, the love that had survived even death. She would have loved you for saving me, for choosing love over revenge. That night, they lay in their bed with the windows open, letting the night breeze carry the scent of growing things. Zara's head rested on Jackson's shoulder while he traced gentle patterns on her arm. Do you ever regret it? She asked softly. Giving up your old life? Never, Jackson replied without hesitation. That wasn't living, it was just surviving. This. He gestured to encompass their home, their life, the future growing within her. This is what I was meant for. Even the farming, she teased. I remember you saying you'd sworn off agriculture forever. Well, he grinned. I had the right teacher this time, Zara laughed, remembering those first awkward weeks when she'd known even less about farming than he'd pretended to forget. They'd learned together, making mistakes and celebrating small victories, building something entirely their own. The council wants me to serve as an ambassador, she said, broaching the subject they'd been avoiding, to help establish diplomatic relations with the Ethrosian colonies. Jackson's hand stilled on her arm. What did you tell them? That I'd consider it. After the baby's born, after we've had time to settle into being parents. She turned to look at him in the moonlight. But only if you're willing to share me with the galaxy occasionally. As long as you always come home to me, he said, his voice carrying the weight of a promise. We're partners, remember, whatever you choose to do, we'll face it together. The baby kicked again, as if agreeing with her father's words. Zara smiled, imagining their daughter growing up in a world where she could choose her own path, whether that led to the diplomatic corps, the farming life, or something entirely unexpected. I love you, she whispered, the words carrying all the gratitude and wonder she felt for the life they'd built together. I love you too, Jackson replied, his arms tightening around her. More than I ever thought possible. Outside their window, the stars wheeled overhead, the same stars that had witnessed their first meeting, their desperate flight, and now their peaceful happiness. The galaxy continued its ancient dance, but here in their small corner of it, two hearts had found their home. The auction house seemed like a lifetime ago. The woman who had been sold for a night of pleasure had instead found a lifetime of love, and had given the same precious gift in return. As sleep claimed them both, their unborn daughter stirred in her mother's womb, already sensing the love that would surround her from her very first breath. In the end, it wasn't the stars that had guided them to safety, it was love itself, burning bright enough to light their way through the darkness and into the dawn of a new beginning. Retriclod can make mistakes. Please double-check responses.